What's going on, fellow engineers? So in this video, I'm actually going to close this gap here that is between the door jamb. Stay tuned. Alright, so as you see, there's a door jamb gap here where the light from the outside is coming in, and if I push up on the door, it disappears. So what I'm going to do is actually move this over. It's fairly simple to do. I believe this gap came in when I updated the length of the screws that go into the faceplates here. So I put in longer screws, and so as a result, those screws pulled this jamb here over some. So not only am I going to back out the screws some, but then I'm also put some shims behind here so that this is forced to come back this way closer to the door, thus removing this gap here that's letting like air and light in and so forth. Alright, so first things first is to back out the screws that are here as well as here. These are deadbolt plate up here, and then that is the doorknob plate down here. And so if you don't remove them all the way, you at least need to back them out some, so that gives you room to move this jamb over some this way. Otherwise, when you try to push shims or anything else behind here to move this over, you're not going to be able to do so because the screw is going to hold it in. So back them out first. Alright, so what I did also on the hinge side of the door is to back out these longer screws that are in here on this side. And the reason being is sometimes if you put longer screws in here and these longer screws grab the stud, if you keep tightening them, they'll actually pull the hinge side of the door in, which means the strike plate side of the door will still be the same, but the door will actually move that way with the strike plate still being in the same place, thus you getting a gap over here. So like I say, backed them out, confirmed that I'm still getting a gap here when I close the door. And you can't really tell because I have the screws out now, but if the screws weren't there, you would still be able to see the gap that shows up. That's not going to be right. So the next step is to take off this piece of trim here, and then we'll be able to have access behind here to be able to put shims in. Now, depending on the trim that you have, sometimes there is caulk between the wall and the trim on the door. This trim is not actually painted with like paint. It's, actual wood with stain on it. So they did not put caulk here, but if they did have caulk here, I would have to take this box cutter, run it in that gap there and cut the caulk and then remove the trim. And the reason you want to do it in that order is because if you try to pull this trim off without cutting the caulk first, the caulk, when it goes to pull, it might actually pull pieces of the wall off with it. So be sure to do it in that order. Alright, so with your pry bar, then you stick it in. There's usually a gap between this jamb here and the trim, and you stick it in and just work your way all the way from top to bottom. I started in the middle because sometimes the middle is easier just to start with, and then you slowly just work your way. Don't try to pull it all out at once, like go up and down several times and pull in sections, if you will, because if you try to pull it all out at once, you'll risk splitting the trim. So usually what I do is go here, move down maybe 6 inches or so, do again another pull, and just keep going down the whole way until I get all the way down to the bottom, and then go back and work my way all the way up to the top, and just keep doing that until you get it all the way out. And be mindful, there are nails. As you can see, there's one right there, and so there's another right there. So once you do get it out, be sure not to stick yourself with the nail. And like that, you have the trim off. Be mindful on these corners here. There's usually a nail in there, and so that makes the corner kind of difficult to pull off. But all you gotta do is just nail this back through and hit it on this end, and it'll back out. And then when you go to secure it again, you'll just nail it back in. And the same thing for these screws on the trim here. Just nail them backwards, and all of them. There may be some like that may have gotten stuck on this piece here. All you gotta do is use your hammer, pull them off, and go from there. And so as you see, there is a gap here between the drywall and the jamb. And so if you want, you can fill this in with insulation or spray foam. And then you'll also need to put in your shims wherever they need to go. We'll cover that a little bit more in the next step. So I have my shims in. I have not positioned them for final placement though. But if you can tell though, so the shims are right here and the actual door jamb is way further back. So there's actually a gap right here where I can kind of stick my finger in, if you can kind of see down in there. And so what you want to try to kind of do is to make sure that gap between the shim and the jamb and, well, the stud are all filled up together. And so sometimes that's a little bit more difficult to do because of the drywall. As you see here, the drywall is pretty flush up with the jamb of the door. And so what I'm going to do is actually put the shims behind the screw holes that are here so that they stay in their appropriate place. And hopefully they'll actually hold the jamb where it needs to be. In the worst case scenario, you'll have to actually cut the drywall back and fill the entire gap behind this faceplate here and any other faceplates or where it's not perfectly straight on the door, and to get the jamb to move over. After several positioning attempts, I have one shim behind the deadbolt and another one behind the doorknob. And so actually just going to open and close the door to confirm that, you know, it doesn't bind or anything when you try to close it or anything of that nature. And so now that I've confirmed it, ensure that the latch actually catches like it should. So if I slam it, it should automatically catch, and excuse the noise from the blindness on this door. But like I say, if it catches like it should and you pull on it, then all is good. And then you also want to test the deadbolt to make sure that it moves freely, doesn't bind or anything of that nature. So now that I've confirmed all of this is working, then I take the screws that I had in my face plates for the deadbolt and the doorknob and screw those back in, making sure that I hit the shims on the way through, and that'll hold this in place. And then once I do that, then I cut the shims off. Once you have all of the screws reinstalled into the faceplates, as you see here, then you take your box cutter and you go along the edge right here and score the shim. And then you may have to score it for the thicker end of the shim. You might have to score it several times, but the thinner piece, you might only need to do it like once or twice. And then you can just bend it and it snaps off. So what I do next is knock the nails back through the trim. So this is the pointy end of the nail and this is the head end. And so as you see, it's split a little bit, but once you knock this nail back through, it'll straighten back out. And so if your trim is painted, you may have to paint it over it again to make like the splinters disappear. But if you see, if I hold it from this angle, you really don't see that the splitting of the wood, but you do now because of the nail. And so that's it. Like I say, knock all the nails back in and then put it back in position. Be sure that your corners line up at the top, and then also be sure that your end at the bottom where it meets the floor also lines up. And if you have like baseboard trim next to it like I do, be sure you want to close that gap in as well. Alright, and so once you're done, like I already knocked the nails back in, and so you can kind of see there's still a nail hole here. And so, but you can get what is like a punch down tool or nail head tool, which you use to knock this. It basically is like a pin looking thing, and so you stick the end of that on top of the nail head, and then you hammer it in all the way, and then that way you're able to drive the nail below the surface. And then if you have like painted trim, you can fill it in with caulk and paint back over it. On this wood trim, you could use like wood filler and do the, you know, resand it down and so forth, and then that'll be it. And so last final test is to close the door one more time. And so as you see, that gap that was there previously is no longer there, and as still the door handle still latches as well as the deadbolt, and it opens and closes freely. So hopefully this video has helped you. If you have any questions, put those in the comment section below.